So I want to explain to people what the hell is David doing. So this is what I'm currently working on. I'm going to be having a conversation with ChatGPT. I have actually gave you, Mr. ChatGPT, over maybe 15, 16 well-sourced wealth of knowledge to explain the hidden debt in China and the underground systemic implications of such the debt. We will be discussing a handful of things, including the history, what to do with it, how to invest in China with the systemic risk, and anything else that comes up during this conversation. The goal of this conversation is to help any and all people interested in investing to gain a comprehensive understanding of the topics being discussed today. So, with that being said, I will allow you, Mr. ChatGPT, to take the floor. I have given you a bunch of information beforehand, as I've said, so let's get started. Can you give me a historical breakdown of everything we had discussed in terms of the 90s until now and the Chinese debt?
Absolutely, David. Thanks for the intro. Let's dive right into the history of China's local government debt and how we got here. In the early 1990s, China underwent a major fiscal reform known as the 1994 tax sharing system. This reform centralized much of the tax revenue at Beijing, leaving local governments with limited fiscal resources to cover their growing expenditure responsibilities. To bridge this fiscal gap, local governments created local government financing vehicles. These LERCs were essentially special purpose entities that allowed local governments to raise funds off their official balance sheets, primarily through land sales and infrastructure projects.
Okay, great. Now, can you go ahead and give us a little bit more detail? We went over in the 90s. Do we have any information about the 2000s, 2008, 2016, and today within the 2020s? And can you go in that order?
Absolutely. Let's break down the timeline from the 2000s onward in that order.
I'm ready whenever you are.
Great, let's dive into it. We'll cover the full history of China's local government debt, LGFVs, and the systemic implications so everyone can understand what's going on. Ready for the deep dive?
Ready when you are.
All right, let's dive right in. We'll pick up from the 2000s and move through each key period up to today.
Uh-huh.
Increasingly crucial. As local governments leaned heavily on land sales for revenue, they used these funds to finance massive infrastructure projects.
Right, right. Now, let's go ahead and start off in the early 2000s. What information were you able to dig up?
In the early 2000s, China's local governments ramped up urbanization and infrastructure development. They relied heavily on LGFVs, local government financing vehicles, to raise funds, often using land sales as collateral. This period saw a massive infrastructure boom as local governments used LGFVs to finance roads, bridges, and urban projects. This laid the foundation for the growing hidden debt issue.
Okay, so we did already discuss that. Now, I want to challenge you a little bit, Mr. ChatGPT. Why don't we go ahead and do a couple of things? So, what about 2008? Was this still the exact same practice?
Great challenge, David. The 2008 period was actually a turning point. When the global financial crisis hit, China launched a huge stimulus package of about 4 trillion yuan. A large portion of that funding was funneled through LGFVs, greatly expanding their borrowing and leading to a surge in local government debt. So it wasn't exactly the same practice. It was an intensification of what had been happening, leading to even greater reliance on LGFVs.
What about in 2016?
In 2016, China began to tighten regulations on local government debt. The government introduced policies aimed at curbing hidden debt and increasing transparency. They pushed for debt swaps to convert LGFV debt into official municipal bonds, trying to bring more of the debt into the open and reduce financial risk.
Sure. Now, what about the 2020s?
The 2020s have been quite eventful for China's local government debt situation. With the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, local governments faced increased spending pressures and declining revenues. As a result, LGFEs accumulated even more debt. The government has been implementing various measures to manage and reduce hidden debt, including debt swaps, tighter regulations, and encouraging more transparency. But the structural challenges remain a big focus as they try to balance economic growth with financial stability.
So let me ask you, why didn't China just fund this themselves? Why did these individual players in each of these cities find it so important for them to grow on their own?
That's a great question. It really comes down to how China's fiscal system was structured. After the 1994 tax reforms, local governments were given a lot of responsibility for funding infrastructure and social services, but they didn't have enough direct revenue sources. So, local governments turned to LGFEs to raise funds off the books, often using land sales and other local resources. This gave local leaders a way to drive rapid growth and development, which was crucial for their own career advancement and for boosting their local economies. So in a way, it was a combination of fiscal constraints and local incentive that led to the situation.
Okay, so how much in debt are we talking? And when we look at the overall money supply alongside GDP, what does the percentages look like?
The numbers are pretty staggering. Estimates for China's local government hidden debt through LGFEs range from around 59 trillion yuan to over 70 trillion yuan, which is roughly $8.3 trillion to nearly $9.8 trillion. When you look at that in relation to China's GDP, which is around 17 to 18 trillion dollars, that hidden debt can be about 40% to 50% of GDP. It's a massive percentage, showing just how significant this issue is in relation to China's overall economy and money supply.
So what's the best case and worst case scenario on the outcome? Let's just say the trade wars succeed in America, or let's just say that China and its demographic collapse continues in the rate that it's going, and all of those. Do we believe, number one, that all of these debts are sustainable? And if they're not sustainable, what kind of a percentage can we look to create in our model that would really give us a direct understanding of where their pain tolerance would be in terms of defaults, cities maybe not ever being able to be upgraded or not upgraded at the same rate of path if the government chooses to try to tighten the money control and or put controls on these type of projects?
That's a really insightful set of questions. Let's break it down into best case and worst case scenarios. Best case scenario, successful economic rebalancing. China manages to shift from a heavily investment-driven growth model to a more consumption-based and innovation-driven economy. Debt restructuring success. The government's debt swaps and refinancing measures effectively reduce the hidden debt burden, allowing local governments to continue operating without major defaults. Stable global trade relations, even if trade tensions exist, they remain manageable, allowing China to maintain healthy export levels. In this best-case scenario, the debt is largely sustainable. The percentage of problematic debt that might default could be kept relatively low, perhaps within a range of a few percentage points, and managed through controlled restructuring. Cities can continue to upgrade and grow, albeit at a moderated pace.
So, are these vehicles similar to local municipality bonds? Or would you say that these are extremely unique vehicles that Chinese cities and towns have to jump through the hoops in terms of the way that they're structured?
They're definitely a unique feature of China's system. While local government financing vehicles, LGFEs, share some similarities with municipal bonds in that they raise funds for local projects, the structure is quite different. LGFEs often operate off the official balance sheets of local governments, rely heavily on land sales as collateral, and sometimes lack the transparency and standardized oversight you'd see with typical municipal bonds. So while they serve a similar purpose in funding local projects, they definitely have a unique structure and set of challenges. Do you have in mind?
Sure. So let's just start spitballing. So I think the first thing that I want to take into consideration is who exactly is lending this money?
Great question. The lenders for these local government financing vehicles, LGFEs, in China are a mix of different players. A significant portion of the lending comes from Chinese state-owned banks. They provide loans and purchase bonds issued by LGFEs. Besides banks, there are also domestic institutional investors and sometimes even trust companies and other financial institutions. Foreign investors do participate, but to a lesser extent, mainly through certain bond programs. So it's a complex mix with a big role played by the state-owned banking sector.
Yeah, so first off, do you have any exact information on who? Can you give me a list of banks, individuals? There had to have been people that were peddling this inside of an attempt not only to invest in the country, but also to get rich. Let's not forget, this is capitalism after all. So let's try getting into that. Who? Do you have any information on the name of the bankers, the banks, the insurance companies? Who runs them? Is it local millionaires, billionaires, people that are from the tech sector, people that are from the agriculture sector in China? Who is paying for this?
That's a fascinating angle. While we don't have a specific list of individual bankers or names, the major players behind China's LGFE debt are largely the big state-owned banks. These include institutions like the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, ICBC, the China Construction Bank, the Agricultural Bank of China, and the Bank of China. These state-owned banks are key in providing loans and purchasing LGFE bonds. In addition to the major banks, there are also large Chinese insurance companies, some trust companies, and various investment funds that participate. There are definitely wealthy individuals and entrepreneurs, some from the tech and real estate sectors, who invest in these instruments, seeing them as opportunities for returns. But the driving force is really those large state-owned financial institutions that dominate the landscape.
Now, what were these bonds yielding? Do you know?
The yields on LGFE bonds can vary quite a bit depending on the region, the creditworthiness of the issuing vehicle, and market conditions. Generally, LGFE bonds tend to offer higher yields than central government bonds because they carry more risk. On average, you might see LGFE bonds yielding anywhere from around 4% to 6%, but in some cases it can be even higher depending on the specific circumstances and market environment.
Do you know today what all of those instruments would be yielding at all, if any? And also, are there any publicly traded entities that hold this?
As of mid-2025, the yields on LGFE bonds can vary quite a bit depending on the issuer and maturity. For example, a 10-year LGFE bond from a less creditworthy issuer might yield around 3.95%, while bonds from more stable entities could have lower yields. In comparison, China's 10-year government bond yield about 1.7%, reflecting their lower rate. As for publicly traded entities, many large Chinese banks and institutional investors hold LGFE debt, while exact holders aren't always disclosed. These bonds are a significant part of many portfolios, especially within China's financial sector.
So I think what's most important is how many of these bonds defaulted during Evergrande and their real estate collapse? Now, is there a certain percentage or a threshold that we can gather from that?
During the Evergrande crisis and the broader real estate collapse, the property sector experienced a significant surge in defaults. In fact, the default rate for property companies reached about 27.8% in 2022, according to S&P Global. Interestingly, no local government financing vehicle, LGFE, defaulted in the public markets during that period. This suggests that while the property sector faced severe stress, LGFEs managed to avoid outright defaults, at least publicly.
So I think that my next question is,
Sure thing. Feel free to ask your next question, and I'll do my best to help with whatever you need.
Sure. So at the end, what was the original article? It was a photo that I sent you from, it's like China News. Now tell me, what is the point of sharing this information publicly, despite the fact that it's available? Why would they want this information out there?
Great question. The article you shared from News China about China's approach to local government debt is likely part of a broader effort to increase transparency and reassure both domestic and international audiences. By sharing this information publicly, they can show that the government is taking proactive steps to manage hidden debt, stabilize local finances, and implement reforms. This transparency can help build confidence among investors and the public, showing that they're serious about addressing financial regs.
What are some actual projects that we can find in real life that were completed using this vehicle?
Local government financing vehicles, LGFEs, have funded a wide range of infrastructure projects in China. Some notable examples include urban metro systems. Many Chinese cities like Chengdu and Wuhan have expanded their subway networks using funds raised by LGFEs.
I know you
Major
know more. There's no way. Come on.
Absolutely. There are plenty more examples out there. Airport expansions, many regional airports, like those in second tier cities, have been expanded or newly built with LGFE funding. Stadiums and convention centers, cities have developed large scale public venues, such as sports stadiums and convention centers, using LGFE financing. Water treatment plants. Environmental projects like wastewater treatment facilities have also been funded through these vehicles. LGFEs have truly been at the heart of China's infrastructure boom, funding a wide array of projects that have reshaped cities and regions across the country.
So, is there a main reason why they're going ahead and backing assets, real tangible things, towards these bonds? Is that a strategy highlighted from any of the information that I gave you?
Yes, that's definitely a strategic approach highlighted in the information you provided. By backing LGFE bonds with real tangible assets like infrastructure projects or land, local governments aim to make these bonds more appealing and credible to investors. It provides a form of security and shows that there are actual assets and revenue generating projects behind the debt. It's a way to build confidence and demonstrate that these bonds are tied to concrete developments that can potentially generate returns.
Is there any public information about actual large scale projects in China that are asset backed?
China has undertaken several large scale infrastructure projects funded by local government financing vehicles.
Okay, tell me. Go ahead.
Sure. One prominent example is the South North Water Transfer Project, a massive infrastructure project aimed at diverting water from the Yangtze River in southern China to the more arid northern regions, including Beijing and Tianjin. This project is asset backed by various LGFEs, reflecting the importance of tangible infrastructure in supporting these financing mechanisms. Another notable example is the Beijing Daxing International Airport, one of the world's largest airports, which was financed through LGFE funding. These projects highlight how LGFEs support large-scale, tangible infrastructure developments across China.
Okay, perfect. And then one more follow-up question for you is going to be, has China tried to implement this strategy anywhere else in the world, maybe like Africa?
China has indeed expanded its financial involvement in other parts of the world, especially through initiatives like the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. In Africa, China has funded many large infrastructure projects such as railways, highways, and ports. While these projects may not use the exact LGFE model, they are often financed through similar state-backed mechanisms, demonstrating a comparable strategy of using infrastructure investments to foster economic ties.
Any other examples from anywhere else in the world?
Absolutely. Around the world, there are many examples of infrastructure projects backed by similar financing mechanisms. One, U.S. municipal bonds. In the United States, municipal bonds have funded projects like the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco and the New York City subway system. In Europe, countries have used bonds to finance projects like the Channel Tunnel between the UK and France and renewable energy projects in Germany. Australia has used infrastructure bonds for projects like the Sydney Harbour Tunnel and various
Sure,
highways.
but I meant more of the similar way that the Chinese use it.
Got it. In that case, there are a few examples that resemble China's LGFEs. Brazil's state development agencies. These agencies often fund large-scale infrastructure projects like highways and public transportation through bonds backed by local assets. India's municipal corporations. Some Indian cities have issued municipal bonds for urban infrastructure projects using revenue-generating assets as backing. South Africa's municipal entities. Certain cities in South Africa have used similar vehicles to finance infrastructure improvements, such as water and sanitation projects. These examples show that other countries also use similar asset-backed financing strategies for local and regional development.
All right. Well, I think that's all my questions. And I think what's really important for the audience to understand is when we look at these economic scenarios, each country does economics different. And that to me is the best part about our conversation today. Thank you so much, ChatGPT. Everyone else, if you have any questions, put it in the comments. And from there, we will be touching base later on, and we'll be figuring all out future questions. If you guys like this series, let me know. If you guys don't, then that's fine. But regardless, one more question for you, Mr. ChatGPT, related to China's debt. How much has the average Chinese citizen benefited and not benefited from these bonds?
That's a great final question. The average Chinese citizen has definitely seen some benefits from LGFE-funded projects. These include better infrastructure like new metro systems, highways, and public facilities, which can improve daily life and economic opportunities. On the flip side, the heavy reliance on debt can also mean that resources are sometimes allocated inefficiently. And the financial risks could impact economic stability. In the long run, if these debts aren't managed well, it could lead to financial strains that might affect public services or economic growth, which in turn would impact citizens. So it's a balance of visible improvements versus potential long-term financial risks.